My wife disappeared, and they found her lying in the middle of nowhere. We never expected that all of this was her idea.
That day, I was eager to get home with my wife and my 2 kids.
Taylor, love, I'm home. But no one answered.
We're sorry. The number you have dialed is out of service.
Maybe she's picking up the kids.
Hello?
Hello, this is Jacob Williams.
Mr. Williams, we were just about to call you. Are you coming to get the kids?
What?
Mrs. Taylor hasn't come for them yet.
This can't be happening. I want to report a missing person. It's my wife. What seemed like just a delay or a dead phone battery turned into a real nightmare.
Taylor Williams, a young woman around 30 years old, is still missing. The police are working on it, but there are no signs of her yet.
My wife had disappeared without a trace, and all theories pointed to one person.
Come with me, sir.
What? Are you crazy? She's my wife. I was the main suspect in the case, and as painful as it was, the police had to proceed against me, at least until my innocence was proven.
Is your name Jacob Williams?
Yes.
Is your wife Taylor Williams?
Yes.
So you her.
But of course, there was no evidence against me. Everyone thought I was responsible for Taylor's disappearance. The accusations continued, and the investigation went on but seemed to be going nowhere. I felt devastated and hopeless until 22 days later, the impossible happened.
Taylor has been found almost 250 kilometers from where she was last seen.
A driver found her lying at the side of the road with chains on her.
What? Ma'am.
Help me.
911, please. Come quickly.
The police responded to the call immediately, and my wife was rescued and properly attended to. She was in very bad shape. Her body was covered in bruises, she had lost a lot of weight, her hair was short, and they discovered a branding burn on her back. The police were in shock.
Taylor, we know you're going through a very difficult time, but could you tell us what happened?
They wanted to sell me.
Taylor recounted that it was 2 women who had kidnapped her. She said their intention was to sell her out of the country, and that was why she had been branded.
An old woman, tall, and the other was younger, with black hair and brown eyes.
She continued describing the incident in detail, and even gave a description of these 2 women specific enough to create a composite sketch. As part of the evidence, the police analyzed the clothes Taylor was wearing on the day she was rescued, and what they found surprised them greatly.
Sir, you might want to review these results.
The DNA found on her clothes belonged to a man and not 2 women, as she had said in her story. The results were processed through the police database, but there were no matches. It wasn't until a few years later, after the investigation had taken different directions, that these results were revisited and processed through a genealogical database. The result revealed the true identity of the person whose DNA had been found on the clothes. The individual was Daniel Jackson. Now it remained to verify whether this person had any direct relationship with Taylor or not. With a little investigation, they realized something disturbing. Daniel Jackson was none other than her ex-boyfriend. Taylor never spoke to me about him.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Come with us. We have some questions to ask you.
Nothing seemed to make sense, but after much insistence from the police, Daniel started talking.
Fine, I admit it. I was the one who picked up Taylor that afternoon, but only because she told me her husband was abusing her. She wanted me to help her disappear for a while.
Daniel stated that my wife had been living in his house all that time. She stayed in her room while he slept on the couch.
I thought it was just a lover's quarrel, but a few days later she started acting strangely. She didn't want to eat and would sit in the dark doing nothing. It wasn't like her. I wanted to help her, but I didn't know what to do.
He also said that Taylor would go from sitting and watching reports of her own case on television to sudden bursts of rage that led her to harm herself and tear out pieces of her hair. I couldn't believe anything Daniel was saying.
I was afraid of getting hurt if I got too close or if I denied her something.
The most terrifying part was when Taylor begged Daniel to help her brand herself. He even went to buy everything necessary to carry out the act.
I didn't want to do it. She forced me.
I thought it was the typical scenario of a jealous ex-boyfriend losing his mind and trying to cover up his crime.
Why did you leave her on the road in the middle of nowhere?
That's what she asked me to do.
Apparently, 22 days after the supposed % dollar ping, Taylor decided that she had had enough and missed our 2 kids and me. Daniel was released and cleared of all charges.
Go ahead, this is the room.
It's just as Taylor described.
That's why her description was so convincing.
Later, while searching Daniel's house, the police found the box where all the tools for the branding were kept. It was labeled crafts. As part of the investigation, the police conducted a series of interviews with Daniel's neighbors, and it was then that another mystery was solved.
Good afternoon, ma'am. We won't take much of your time.
Come in.
In one of the neighboring houses, a 53-year-old woman, Josie, lived with her daughter, Julia.
I had no idea. Daniel has always been a good neighbor. I can't imagine the hell he must have lived through.
Taylor was immediately arrested. She tried to give a series of explanations to cover up her story, but the lack of consistency ultimately exposed her. One by one, the police disproved all the statements she had made right before their eyes with solid evidence, until she had no choice but to confess the deception.
You're in big trouble.
Why did you do it?
I believed her lie for so long that now I didn't know what to do. How could you do this to us, Taylor?
The jury finds defendant guilty.
My wife was sentenced to 18 months in prison.
Daddy, where are they taking Mommy?
I couldn't stand Taylor's lies and indifference anymore, and I decided to separate from her as soon as she was imprisoned. I was the only visitor Taylor had. I never went back to see her until I received terrible news. 12 months into her sentence, my wife was found dead in her cell. She couldn't handle it anymore.
These are your wife's belongings.
Thank you, officer.